Your teacher has assigned you to write a narrative essay, and you're struggling. Has anything interesting enough for an essay ever happened to you? It occurs to you that you could write about the big move you made at the beginning of high school. You had to leave all your friends and start over again in a place where you knew no one. The story seems almost too simple. How would you turn it into an essay? A narrative essay is a type of writing where you use a story, usually from your own experience, to develop whatever idea or point you want to get across to the reader. That last part, that you are making a point or transmitting an idea, is particularly important. The difference between a simple story and a narrative essay is that an essay develops a thesis, and that thesis tells the reader what the takeaway from the story is supposed to be. The narrative essay tells a story that means something. It explains the world or offers a life lesson for the reader's consideration. In other types of essays, you have to think about not just what your main points will be, but what's the most logical or effective way to organize those points. You may think you don't have to worry about that with the narrative essay because you're telling a story. So you're going to tell the events of that story in the order that they happened. Actually, this is one reason why narrative essays are assigned. This type of essay is a good introduction into essay organization because the student can follow the storyline. Besides, the ability to tell a story to illustrate a point is an essential skill in professional communication. There are several possibilities for organizing a narrative essay, as long as you are telling the story in a way that is clear and effective. The most simple is to think about what you learned in elementary school about story structure. All stories have a beginning, a middle, and an end. This includes how things were at the beginning of the story, how things are different at the end, and what happened in the middle that caused that change. For example, if I am telling a story about how I learned to make friends all over again after a move across the country, I might organize the story this way. In the beginning, I have a group of friends that I've known since childhood. I hardly remember how we became friends because we were simply in the same class at school and we played together. At the end of the story, I have my new group of friends who I met by joining clubs at school or going to community events where I could meet people with common interests. In the middle, there is a whole story to be told about why we moved, how hard the adjustment was, and how I figured out new strategies for connecting with people. Thinking about the story as a beginning, middle, and end is a good starting place for an outline. Using those three broad categories as main points, what subpoints would you need to add to help the reader understand events? The outline would look something like this. Notice that I haven't put subpoints under the beginning or the end. This is because most of the action happened in the middle of the story. That is where everything changes. The beginning is what English teachers call exposition. It's background to help you understand what is about to happen. Likewise, the end is the resolution of the story. It's the satisfactory conclusion where we learn how everything turned out. Again, the plot of the story is really in the middle, where things are changing from one status quo to another. While a simple approach might be just fine for your essay, you could make the story more dramatic by using a plot chart as a framework. This is the chart English teachers often use to describe the action in short stories. The story begins with exposition. Then comes rising action, climax, falling action, and denouement. Revisiting my making new friends story, the exposition would recount my friend group at my old school. The rising action happens when my parents make the decision to move to a new state, upending my life. The climax arrives when I get to the new school and have all the experiences of being in a strange place and knowing no one. As I meet new friends, we are in falling action. Can you feel the stress of the story decrease as my situation slowly improves? Finally, the denouement, which is just a fancy word for the resolution of the story, arrives as I have settled into my new friend group. I have a new normal. One more framework that might work for you is the hero's journey. This is a model that was created by literary scholar Joseph Campbell to explain a pattern he saw repeated in myths and folk tales around the world. In the hero's journey, a seemingly ordinary or insignificant person is called out of their ordinary life. There is a call to action, a period of training, a quest, a journey to the underworld, a resurrection of some type, taking on a new identity, for example, and then a return to ordinary life. What makes the hero's journey extraordinary is that when the hero returns, they bring with them some power or knowledge that can change society for the better. I'm oversimplifying it a bit, but the basic outline of calling out, quest, and return appears in all the world's great hero stories, from Hercules to Harry Potter. This framework can work for you if you are telling a story about how you overcame a challenge or made an important discovery. Something like how I discovered that ADHD is a superpower, or how I grew up by helping my mother on her journey with cancer. The hero's journey works for those dramatic stories where something happened and your world was never the same again. A simplified version for students might look like this outline: an introduction, then the main points are the call, how you were prepared, the journey, the change, the return with new knowledge or power, and finally, a conclusion. At this point, you might be wondering, do I need an outline to tell a story? Maybe not, but it is usually a good idea to draft an outline when you are writing an essay, which is what this is. Think about the structure of an essay as a kind of skeleton. Your bones give your body a frame for structure and support. The structure of an essay frames the story in a way that supports the thesis. Since we mentioned the hero's journey, remember that the hero brings something back to the community, some new wisdom or insight gained from the quest. Your thesis is the insight you gained, and the outline of the narrative ensures that the story builds up to that main idea. Instead of wandering through past events, you are concentrating on the parts of the story that prove the point your thesis makes. If the point of the story about moving and making new friends is that I came away from that experience with a more mature idea of friendship, then I should outline an essay that highlights the differences between the old friend set and the new one. Perhaps these friendships that had slowly evolved with my childhood classmates weren't that great in hindsight. Or now that I'm older, I realize that I didn't have a lot in common with those friends, or they didn't treat me well, or we argued like siblings. In contrast, the friendships I made when I was older are much richer because they are based on shared interests or matching personalities. I found myself with people I really liked to be around, not just the people who happened to be there. That sounds harsh on our childhood friends, but I think you get the idea. On the other hand, if what I learned is that those childhood friendships are important to me no matter where I live, then my main points will reflect that idea instead. Either way, outlining the story ahead of time will force you to decide what parts of the story are essential to proving your thesis and how they fit together. One more word about essay structure. It does matter that you have a hook, just as you would for any essay, and a conclusion. I'm not a fan of conclusions that summarize what the essay has already said, unless your teacher tells you that they want that kind of conclusion. If the teacher has assigned a summary conclusion as a writing exercise, then you should follow instructions. Otherwise, I always think there are better uses for a paragraph than repeating what has already been said. I recommend a conclusion that comes full circle, back to the hook in the introduction. If my hook is a description of spending an afternoon with my childhood friends, then the conclusion can describe an afternoon with my new friends. Notice how this highlights the personal growth that the essay describes without restating a single point that has already been made. A conclusion that circles back to the hook can make the reader feel like you are completing a thought, not just repeating one. That should get you started with writing an excellent narrative essay. Let me know in the comments if you found the video helpful. Like and subscribe for more content on literature and writing great essays.